Virtually the entire day today, viewer, the Trinamool government in West Bengal has been cracking down on protests on the streets of Kolkata and the surrounding areas, pointing a finger at the protesters and saying, BJP, BJP, politically motivated, BJP, BJP. This is the same party that has literally grown on the back of Jan Andolans and protests. This is the same party led by Mamata Banerjee that has grown all its strength from rage expressed on the streets. This is the party that drew all its energy and its identity from anger expressed by protesters on the political roads of this country. And yet the Trinamool today, after spending 2 weeks more in damage control rather than admitting to a cover-up in the Kolkata rape and murder case, too busy getting the Kolkata police to send out legal notices to all and sundry, today is caught in a truly ironic situation where it seems to be painted into a corner, defensively pointing at protesters on the streets and saying, this is politically motivated. These are BJP Vidyarthi Parishad members. There is nothing organic about this uprising. After completely negating the public anger expressed by doctors and the young people of Kolkata against what happened in the RG Kar Medical College and Hospital over 2 weeks ago, the Trinamool Congress appears to be hell-bent once again on negating its own identity as a party that was built on the strength of protests. As you watch these images of the Trinamool government cracking down on protesters labelled by the party as BJP, the question that comes to mind is, even if they were political protests, what is wrong with that? Doesn't the Trinamool know a thing about political protests? Doesn't the Trinamool know a thing or two about the power of political involvement in protests? Take a look. I'll give you a small list of how the Trinamool has very effectively used protests to make a political point to register its protests. So even as the Trinamool government under Mamata Banerjee now points a finger at all these protesters and dismisses them as political rivals, politically motivated, BJP, left, etc., just take a look at this list. In 2006, the anti-land acquisition movement in Shingur was a big protest by the Trinamool. In 2007, the famous Nandigram movement was a street protest by the Trinamool. In 2012, protests against the railway fare hike saw hundreds of Trinamool members on the streets. In 2014, Trinamool leaders came out in large numbers to protest against the arrest of party members in the Sarada scam. In 2014, Trinamool members came out in large numbers to protest against coal block allocation policy. In 2016, the Trinamool came out in large numbers to protest against demonetization. In 2016, the Trinamool came out in large numbers on the streets to protest against army deployment at toll plazas. In 2017, the Trinamool came out in large numbers on the street to protest against GST implementation. In 2017, the Trinamool came out in large numbers to protest against farm loan waiver rejection. In 2018, the Trinamool came out in large numbers on the streets to protest against Aadhaar required in welfare schemes. In 2019-2020, famously, the Trinamool came out in large numbers onto the streets to protest against CAA and NRC. In 2019, the Trinamool came out in large numbers to protest against the anti-lynching bill's rejection. In 2019, the Trinamool came out in large numbers to protest against the enactment of the Triple Talaq bill. In 2019, the Trinamool Congress came out in large numbers to protest against the misuse of central agencies. In 2020, the Trinamool Congress came out in large numbers to protest against national education policy. In 2020, the Trinamool Congress came out in large numbers onto the streets to protest against fuel price hike. In 2020, the Trinamool Congress came out in large numbers to protest against NEET and JEE exams during COVID-19. In 2021, the Trinamool Congress came out in large numbers onto the streets to protest against bias in allocation of central funds. In 2021, protests against LPG price hike by Trinamool members in large numbers. In 2021, protests by the Trinamool in large numbers on the streets against the delay in release of GST compensation. In 2023, there were big protests, including by Trinamool members, over the suspension of opposition MPs. I've given you but a small sampling of the instances in which the Trinamool Congress has very rightly and justifiably used its political power in the form of large street protests to send out a message to its political rivals, to the governments in power, to agencies, whatever it is, about what it means to oppose an issue. So even while the Trinamool now cracks down on these protests, says there was no permission for these protests, and there is justification in that line as well, the Trinamool should remember what protests actually mean, and that nobody is swayed by this narrative that these are political protests. A party that has carved its identity, has tried to seek a national image as a party that has been built on the shoulders of protests, cannot now be pointing at people on the streets of Kolkata and saying, "Ye political hai." Nobody is buying that.